Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 10 stories ranging from night drives, video game horror stories, and much, much more. As always, I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, a like rating would be very much appreciated. Let's aim for 1100 likes. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time, and I'm always doing my best to make this content the best it can be. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I'll never forget his face. I can see it now. Cloudy but focused-eyed, locked on me like I was the only thing in existence. We were on our honeymoon drive when it happened, gassing up at the only available stop before our 3-hour home stretch. We were heading to a cabin far from home, a wedding present gifted from her family. I don't know if it was the lonely roads or the dark, endless tree line, but I was on edge. I had just started pumping when I noticed him, hovering next to a beat-up Ford pickup. It was an older one with the square headlights and boxy frame. He was minding his business initially, but once his eyes saw me, they never lifted. At first, I give a friendly nod, but when he did nothing but stare, I found the awkward crawl of discomfort settling in. He looked uncomfortable, confused. He reminded me of an extra in a horror film, the figure that was standing off to the side and out of focus. That's how he lingered, even after his nozzle clicked as it was topped off. I stared at the digits on my pump impatiently, keeping him in my peripheral vision as I watched the numbers climb. He was just standing there, staring. Once mine was done, I hung the nozzle up and got my receipt. I gave the old man a parting wave, and he gave me the slightest of nods. He almost looked offended, yanking the door and ducking in. I could even feel him watching after I got in the car. "You see that?" I asked my wife, who was sitting in the passenger seat. Her face was buried in her phone, scrolling through videos of people doing embarrassing dances. "Hmm?" she said tiredly, not quite looking away. Her eyes were haggard, the screen time keeping her awake until we were on the road again. "That old man, he was staring at me," I said. Turning the key in the ignition, our little Honda started up and I buckled my seatbelt. "What? Where?" she asked, looking up away from her phone. She looked around until she saw him. He was still there, standing next to his truck. "Creepy," she said, turning back around. "Maybe he's looking at you," I joked, putting it in drive and pulling away. I watched in the mirror, the old man's head swiveling slowly as we left. It gave me the chills. "What, am I bony ass?" she snorted, and I grabbed her hand, interlocking our fingers. "Maybe. You get the GPS back up?" I asked, pulling back onto the road. The long stretch of lines reflected off the headlights. "Oh, right, sorry," she said, bringing it up again. The bright GPS screen lit up the cab, and when the blue line on the grid collected itself, the voice spoke over Bluetooth. "In 2 miles, take a right." "You almost there?" She yawned, nestling back in her seat. "Not really," I said, adjusting the rearview mirror. Off in the distance, a set of square headlights was turning out of the gas station. "Can you wake me up when we're close?" she asked, already falling asleep. I watched the headlights for a moment, heading in the same direction as us. I pressed the accelerator further. "Sure thing, honey." Surely, it was just a coincidence. I kept my eyes forward, watching for deer in the passing trees. I messed with the radio, trying to find something to listen to. Behind me, the headlights were getting closer. I tuned the dial and found a station, only for it to be cut off by the automated voice. "In 500 feet, take the next right." I slowed down, watching both the headlights and the upcoming turn. I thought of the old man's stare and how he stood perfectly still, never looking away. Just picturing it made me shudder. Turn right. I slowed and cut the wheel, turning onto another long back road, one that looked shadier than the last. My wife opened her eyes for a second before snuggling back against the door. In 3 miles, take a left. I kept driving, both hands on the wheel. I was tired as hell, every yawn watering my eyes and making me drowsier. I rubbed my face, massaging my cheeks to remove the stiffness. I watched the mirror subconsciously, waiting for the truck to fly past. I watched silently, seeing the glow come closer and closer. I watched them slow and pan over, the headlights bouncing on the old suspension. The truck was still following. Honey, honey, wake up. I nudged her, and she groaned. What? She stretched. That old man, he's following us. I said, my hands gripping the wheel. What? She said, looking behind us. The truck was gaining, chugging behind us through the night. I tried to go faster, but it kept speeding up, the headlights getting closer and closer. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe he lives around here. You didn't say something to him, did you? She asked. No, nothing. I tried to wave. That's about it, I said. Huh. Maybe he'll turn off. Ahead was a traffic light, the soothing green glow like a beacon. I sped up to try and catch it, but almost as if in spite, it started changing. Damn, I said, slowing down again. My eyes darted between the traffic light and the truck. It practically flew up on us, headlights blinding in the mirrors as we stopped for the red. The truck was loud, a big engine and old exhaust echoing right behind us. My wife looked behind us and shielded her eyes. I stared at the red light as if my will would make it change faster. He's getting out, my wife said, and my blood ran cold. What? I asked, checking the side mirror. Fuck, babe. He's got a knife. She squeezed my shoulder, looking frantic. In the mirror, I saw him close the truck door and started walking up to us. I saw the light hit the blade in his hand, and he started shuffling faster, his image growing as I watched. What the fuck? What the? I said, climbing up. Go, babe. Go, go, go. She yelled and I looked both ways. The light was still red. The old man was out my window. I stomped on the gas as the tires squealed, the car lurching as it caught traction. We blew the intersection and I watched the dark silhouette shuffle back to his truck and throw open the door. In the light of his cab, I could see him hitting his steering wheel. In 1 mile, take a left. We sped away, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. The truck was moving again, but my head start had bought us time. My wife turned in her seat, watching the truck struggle to keep up. Ahead, I saw the green rectangular sign for a back road. In 500 feet, take a left. Hang on, I shouted, slamming on the brakes. For what? She shouted but grabbed the overhead handle anyway. Spinning the wheel quickly, I turned right instead and gunned it down an unfamiliar, unkempt stretch of road. The pavement was poor and cracked, the lines barely legible in the center. I swerved to hit potholes and broken sticks. What are you doing? She shouted, holding on for dear life. We gotta lose him, I said, nervously watching the mirror. Make a U-turn. The road was dark and winding, taking us up hills and under old railway bridges. I squealed on every curve, our little car struggling to miss the many obstacles in the road. Garbage bags, old mattresses leaned against brush. The trees were dead, towering above us like withered giants in the dark. Make a U-turn. The road grew thinner and more desolate, the shoulders turning into deep, treacherous ditches. I checked the mirror again. Nothing but darkness. It was getting harder to see. I turned the brights on, and it only added to the discomfort, lighting up hundreds more wicked branches and scattered trash. What do we do? My wife asked. My mind raced. I didn't really know. I don't know. Call the police. I shouted, and she unlocked her phone. The bright light hampered my view, the glare infecting every window. Ahead, the road straightened out, getting even more narrow. The tires bounced as the pavement transitioned to gravel, the static of it droning and plinking against the wheel wells deafening us. Ahead, a large orange sign reflected our light, but the high beams were too bright to make out the old lettering. Babe? Make a U-turn. I squinted at it, having no choice but to slow down to the lack of road. I read the sign, big black capital letters echoing in my mind. Babe, I don't have enough signal. Ahead, the road was gone, the sparse gravel blending to dirt, then grass, then nothing. Dead end. The ground ahead ceased to exist. The sheer drop of a cliff waiting on the other side of the old sign. Behind us, the headlights were coming. I parked the car, witnessing the impending doom of the light catch up. Not enough room to turn around. Nowhere to go. Frantically, I searched the inside of the car looking for some kind of weapon. Tossing aside old documents in the center console, I found a flashlight. The truck pulled behind us slowly, blocking us in. I tested the flashlight, and the batteries were dead. Still better than nothing. Stay in the car, I yelled and threw open the door. What do you want me to do? She cried, looking from me to the truck. Lock the doors. I gripped the flashlight in my hand, hoping the weight of it would give me courage. It didn't. The old man emerged from his truck, hinges creaking loudly as he pushed his door shut. The knife was in his hand like a spike protruding from his arm. He was breathing hard, his shoulders hunching as his chest heaved. What the hell do you want? I shouted. He took another step forward and stopped, his shadow in the headlights frozen. He craned his head for a moment and stepped back. He moved stiffly, his movements slow. Why are you following me? I shouted again, stepping forward with the flashlight. I could hear my wife sobbing in the car. I was tired of running. I raised the flashlight and marched toward him. He raised the knife, ready to stab. I gripped my teeth and reared back, ready to swing. I saw his face in the dark, his piercing eyes staring just as they had at the gas station. I brought the flashlight down, hoping to knock the weapon from his hand, and stopped. The old man was crying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice choking. I lowered the flashlight slowly, and he lowered the knife. Why are you following us? I asked, lowering my voice. He looked so thin and frail, even in the dark. He put his arms down, both hands squeezed into fists. He looked like he wanted to walk away, his steps hesitant, shaking. I'm sorry. I thought you were my son. I was wrong. I'm sorry. He looked away, trying to shield his face. Wait, what? I asked. I looked to my car where my wife sat on edge, her mouth hanging open. When I saw you at the gas station, I thought you were my son. You looked just like him. But it couldn't be. My son passed away a long time ago now. In a car accident, but you looked just like him. I wanted to be sure. I had to be sure. But your voice. You're not him. You're not Peter. I'm sorry for scaring you. You must be terrified. The old man's son. But the knife. At the light, you were coming at me with a knife. I said. It didn't make any sense. I know. I didn't think that through. I let my emotions get the better of me. I'm just an old fool. I got this from my son all those years ago. I thought you were him. I thought maybe if I could get it to you, you could move on. And I could move on, but I made a mistake. I saw what I wanted to see. I'm sorry. He choked and started backing up. I looked to my wife, who threw up her hands in confusion. I held up a finger and mouthed, "Wait a minute. If you want to press charges, I understand. I'll wait here for the police." He turned and started walking back to his truck. I went after him. "Wait, hang on a second." I called after him and he stopped. He was so much smaller and thinner up close. I guess at the gas station, I saw what I wanted to see too. I gave him a hug. He resisted at first, but when I didn't let go, he gave in and returned it. We stood there for a while. I let him cry for as long as he needed, standing in the square headlights in the middle of nowhere. No press charges. No stabbing or clubbing. I motioned for my wife to get out, and when she joined us, I explained what happened. "My name is Tom. This is my wife, Gina. I'm sorry for almost hitting you, and I'm sorry about your son," I said. "It's all right. My name is Wallace. I'm sorry I scared you good people tonight, but thank you for giving me your time. You didn't have to do that. I appreciate it. Before I go, I think I'd like you to have this. I can't hang on to it anymore." He held out his hand, the hunting knife in his palm, and inscribed across the blade were the words, "For my son." I took it and promised to take care of it, under the stipulation that he take my number so we could talk again. He seemed to enjoy that, and after a hug farewell, and even a few laughs, we parted ways. I watched him walk back to his truck, his head held higher than before. He opened the door and looked at me for a moment, giving a final wave before ducking in. I found myself freezing briefly, before nodding and waving back. Behind him, barely visible, was a man, his hand resting lightly on Wallace's shoulder. He nodded to me with a smile, and after the old man climbed in and shut the door, he was gone. I heard my husband pull in at around 5 p.m., but it wasn't for another 10 minutes that I knew something was off. He had been sitting in his car that entire time without moving. We don't have the space for 2 cars in our driveway, so whoever gets home last has to park out on the street. Usually he walks in immediately with some hot and exciting piece of gossip from the office. Today was not that day. As I walked out, I noticed the windshield was badly cracked. The visibility through the glass was so awful, I don't even know how he managed to drive home. It was quite an annoying sight, given we'd just paid a fortune on the last service. He didn't even acknowledge me as I approached the car. His eyes were laser focused on the rear vision mirror. I tried to gauge what he was looking at and glanced up the neighborhood. There was nothing out of the ordinary. It was a quiet, one-way street. Cute weatherboard houses, freshly cut lawns, and a couple of shady gum trees that loomed over the neighborhood's cars. Exactly what we wanted. It seemed everyone else was inside in a bid to get out of the relentless heat wave. I opened up the passenger door and sat beside him. What happened to the windshield? He sat in silence, gaze locked onto the mirror. His mouth barely moved. Kangaroo. My stomach lurched. Hitting a kangaroo can be a death sentence for a driver. It wasn't uncommon to see them in our suburb as it fringes the rural bushland. But getting one on the road is still scary. I could make out the bloodied point of impact in the glass. He was lucky to be unharmed. Holy shit. Are you alright? I don't know. It was sweltering and he didn't have the air conditioner on. He leant over and shut my door. His eyes remained fixed on the mirror. I wanted to ask what was going on, but then I caught a glimpse. In the rear vision mirror, an obscured person stood at the top of the street. I couldn't make out their silhouette due to the shade from the gum trees, but it definitely looked human. It stood completely still. Its presence filled my body with unbridled dread. I turned my head to get a better view through the rear window. The figure vanished. It had gone in less than a second. I wish that was the last time I ever saw it, but as I glanced back into the mirror, the figure returned. I snapped my head back to the window. Disappeared. It seemed this mysterious person was only visible through the mirror's reflection. I'd never seen anything like this and thought the heat was making me hallucinate. David? What is that? I noticed my husband's breath had become quite shaky. He was terrified. I don't know, he whispered. Normally, it would be comforting to know you weren't imagining such a thing. This confirmation was anything but. The figure began to step forward. Its movements were staggered as it dragged itself to the nearest car. It slowly reached out an arm and swung open the door. It seemed to be looking for something. Unsatisfied with its results, it slammed the door and hurried to the next car in line. I think we should head inside. My husband pushed down the car door locks and looked at me with a finger over his lip. I've never seen him so scared. Small beads of sweat were streaking down his face and dripping off his chin. He shook his head and indicated for us to remain. I wanted to suggest that we drive away, turn on the engine, and never look back at that thing. However, facing the street's dead end made this option impossible. We would have to turn the car around and head straight for the figure if we were to leave. An easy escape wasn't factored in when we were initially drawn to this quiet street. We slowly slid down our chairs and watched as the figure opened and closed the neighborhood's cars, making its way up the street. It would appear to anyone watching without a mirror that the doors were moving on their own volition. Their metallic clunking rang out in a disjointed rhythm. My husband was really struggling. It seemed the stress of this ever-growing threat had caused him to repeat the only two phrases he had just uttered. Kangaroo. I don't know. Kangaroo. I don't know. The figure was far too close when I realized most of our neighbors would also have had their cars locked. It clearly didn't stop the thing. We should have gone inside. The figure's footsteps approached, scuffling along the tarmac. We were next. My husband covered his mouth with a trembling hand. There was a complete silence as we held our breath. The locks popped up. The backseat door swung open, and we felt the weight of the figure enter. The vehicle wobbled and the door closed. We were no longer alone. Something was breathing back there. It was a wheezy kind of breath followed by a slight gurgle, like a lung had been punctured. I had to look. I reached up to the rear vision mirror and angled it downwards. My husband stared at me with widened eyes, shocked at my curiosity. A part of me wished I hadn't done that. In the back seat was a bloodied man. He stared at me, eyes bulging in pain. He looked dead. I think he was dead. His entire face had been crushed and his body was horribly disfigured. He held up a severely broken arm and pointed it towards himself before turning it to the damaged windshield. I followed his finger to the bloodied point of impact on the glass. I froze. I didn't want it to be true. The bloodied man fixed his gaze onto my husband's seat. My mouth was dry of any moisture, but my question still managed to scratch itself out. David, what happened with the windshield? Kangaroo. I don't know. Kangaroo. I don't know. As I closed the door, I heard it lock behind me. Both my husband and the man were still inside. I don't know which one had put the locks back down, but I've decided it wasn't my fate to find out. I went back to the house and removed every single mirror we owned. I never saw either of them again. Let's get it straight. I'm not afraid of what comes after. Would it be trials, imprisonment, or something much worse? I'm afraid that if it is not me, nobody would leak the truth, so I'm blowing the whistle. Just for the sake of my own frail sense of safety, I won't share any personal info. All the names are random, and all the matches are coincidental. We live in a crazy world, right? A couple of decades ago, people couldn't even imagine the technologies that are present in your smartphone, laptop, or gaming console. We are standing on a brink of a day that will introduce us to a new coil of a tech breakthrough spiral. With all these crypto, blockchain, NFT, deep learning things internet brags about lately, it is more than obvious. Yes, those don't look like much reliable to this point. And I, personally, think that not all of the above will see another year, but the point is, back in the days, nobody thought that you can watch HD videos on the screen of your phone while chatting with a person living on another continent over a gaming app with photorealistic avatars that use motion capture. You get the point. Deny it or not, we're at this stage of human history. I work for a company that is responsible for one of those apps. A really popular one, you might imagine. Holding the key role in my department, making magic happen, but enough with the bragging. About a month ago, we received the official proposal from the big guys. They were asking if we would like to get a sneak peek into the Metaverse, so we'd understand the technology, our capabilities and limitations, and be the ones among the first to port our product into their VR environment. We agreed instantly, as you know. You either stay in trends or go down with history. So a week ago, we've received some dev kit stuff. A dozen of devices, access permissions, and nearly a box of paperwork. Metaphorically speaking, as all the forms and manuals came in digital. They sent in some stuff too. A couple of guys named Jack and Beth came along to monitor the testing, answer questions, and ask their own. This wasn't a big surprise, as we had similar experience in the past when some new features were introduced. But would you believe me if I say that it took me no less than 3 hours to read through all the agreement forms and sign all the NDA documentation? There was a lot. I'll spare you the details about handshaking and chit-chats. The devices that happened to be modified versions of Oculus Quest 2 were distributed between folks in the office. We made sure that each department had at least one so we could get a better picture and wide range of opinions, and pick the day of the week to give it a go. And so, the testing started. It feels like I need to make a remark here. I'm not a stranger to a VR technology in general. I myself have a HTC Vive at home, and like to drop by VR chat or slice some fun out of Beat Saber. So if you're expecting this, wow, it was like real world thing here. It was not, but to be completely honest, the visuals were better, yes. I think the Quest supports higher resolutions and they achieve some great things with 3D sound and built-in speakers. But I'm not sure if the regular market ones have the same. I don't own it. But yeah, there we were. Just like in the presentation video, there was a beach location and the house and all 12 of us. First session, not much of a fun. as everybody explored avatar creation options, choosing from hundreds and hundreds of hairstyles, costumes, accessories. Actually, it was quite impressive how the whole thing handled that amount of data seamlessly, because I would expect a massive client download for that type of thing, but no. Just with your browser window, you could browse and apply thousands of things on the fly. After an hour, as we finished, Jack and Beth gathered us and asked about our thoughts so far. If anyone felt motion sickness or headaches, nothing you wouldn't expect. Next day after the lunch, we were gathered again to give it a second try. Nothing alerting here, too. We checked the possibilities, got used to controls, and explored the features such as reaction emoticons, default items, paintbrush, firecrackers, musical instruments, etc., and such. Some of the folks wandered around our virtual beach and tried to interact with the world objects. One of our artists was able to stick a rock he picked up behind the sky texture, and that crashed the whole scene for a moment. So, as you might have guessed, it's still pretty raw and bugs are of plenty. Next day, next session. This time we started with questions from Meta people again. They asked if anyone experienced disturbed sleep, fatigue, headaches. Again, nothing extraordinary. All these symptoms happen to those trying on VR headsets. That day we tried some built-in games like beach volleyball, which pretty much explains the Gathering Point theme, now as I think of it. Probably they were prototyping and picked the beach just because it was done already for the presentation, but that is just my guess. Table tennis and some game about catching falling stars. Yet again at this point you might ask, what's the point of your story, man? What's the threat? I hear you, but please bear with me as I am trying to make the point obvious to you. Sometimes the most horrible things lurk in plain sight, hidden behind a thin tapestry, showing you the sweetest and innocent things. Next day we shared the experience with another team. Yes, we were not the only ones participating, so that kind of makes me feel better for reasons I've described above. It was actually pretty impressive, as there were at least 36 fully detailed animated avatars in a single location in real time. We spoke to each other via built-in microphones. As somebody changed the location settings to snow, we were able to play snowballs and so on. The physics of the materials is something unbelievable. You could almost feel making snowballs as you gave them shape with controllers, and those vibrated lightly as you pushed the hands together, while the soft crunching sound played in the headset resembling real thing. And did I mention the water and the clouds? Anyways, after this session I had the questions to ask, but thanks to my colleague, it was he to go ahead and shoot it. How did you guys manage to pull this off? I think that server's load could possibly melt the rack they are standing on, or something like that. Jack just smiled and Beth replied, "Just wait for tomorrow as we are going to give it a real test." And then it was their turn to question us. It was all regular again up to a point where one of them asked, "Did any of you at any point of the session witness him?" We sat there blinking in confusion, silent, but Beth, I think, just said, "Okay, please never mind. Just next question." Maybe that was some sort of sanity check, just to make sure that we follow and our minds don't just wander somewhere else. I don't know, but yes, it was weird. Next day, as I was grabbing a coffee in the kitchen after the meeting, one of my colleagues who participated in the test stopped by and asked if I had any weird dreams lately. I know the guy, girl very well. We were hired in the same month back in the day, so I'm quite sure that he or she is not of that sensitive type. "No," I replied. "Why?" "It's just, I keep seeing things for past couple of nights in my dreams. And I mean really disturbing things. It's like I'm completely another person, and I know stuff in my sleep that I never knew before. It's hard to explain. Never mind. Probably just some stress kicking in. But no, nothing like that. I've slept like a baby and was full of energy as we began next round of testing. This time there were even more people present. I think the number was close to 70, maybe 80. I'm not sure. And while all of us stood there, chatting or simply spectating, the thing called max load graphical test went on. Think of it as a light show. It was a bunch of different complex pictures appearing in the sky, visualizing geometrical shapes, symbols, graphs, and such. Very intense, very vivid, and very bright. I must admit, it was beautiful. If anyone would experience that there, I'm pretty sure the whole concept would get much more anticipation. Then different objects started to appear right in front of us. Cute puppies waving their tails, strawberry cakes on plates, misted mugs of beer with rich foam and tiny transparent drops running by side. This was next gen type of thing. It was just like the real thing. I felt a strange urge to reach with my hand and give it a touch. And when I say this, I don't mean with my controller. No, real touch. Suddenly I realize that the voice inside of my head keeps repeating, "It's so good. I want that now. I must have it now." I felt my mouth watering. But suddenly the bowl with hot chicken wings that floated in front of me got glitched. At first the steam became static. Then some colored lines appeared crisscrossing it, and finally the whole thing froze. I looked around as if breaking out of my mesmerized state. Others stood there frozen, as if only I could move. And next thing that happened was a sound of someone sobbing. Like real sobbing. Not in the speakers. I took off the gear and looked around. One of my colleagues looked absolutely devastated. Tears were running down her cheeks, making it to the hand that she used to cover her mouth with the controller still in it as her shoulders were shaking while she was clearly weeping, attempting to make it silent. I came up to her and touched her by the shoulder. No reaction. I called her by her name. Same. I shook her lightly. She went on with the crying and suddenly began to hyperventilate. This is no Matrix movie, I said to myself and put my hands onto her headpiece, planning to take it off. As I did, I saw her eyes. God, the look in it shot me through as if I was hit by a snowstorm. She was looking straight at me with a gaze into vast nothingness, with eyes so full of terror I could barely see the pupils of her eyes, as they shrunk to the size of a pin needle. As soon as she realized that she was not in Metaverse anymore, her hand went down helplessly. Her face, distorted with the weeping, stood motionless for a moment, and then she started to scream. I've never heard anybody screaming like that. There was something primal in it. Primal, as in fear. I panicked, freezing in place as her spit landed onto my face, paralyzed by this unexpected act. Thoughts were running places, but before I got a good one, I was broken out of my stupor by another scream left out of me. And another, and yet another one. The whole room was full of people screaming their lungs out. Finally, I got a hold of myself and ran out of the room to call for help. As I did, I saw some people rushing in, wearing what I think was paramedic uniforms. It took me half an hour to get a grip and calm down, as I was sitting in the kitchen surrounded by my colleagues trying to make me feel better and asking what happened there. We saw the guys in the uniforms rolling the stretchers here and there. Some of the people in them had blankets over their faces. God. Of course, we never saw Jack and Beth after the incident. Our CEO called Meta's head office directly to discuss the horrible events, but they stated that those people were never employed or associated with their company. What a bunch of bastards. I took some extra days off from work, and that didn't raise any questions, obviously. 2 days after I decided that I can't remain silent anymore. Fuck it, they probably will figure me out sooner or later. As I mentioned some key details to the incident, I can't say I came out of it traumatized or questioning my sanity, but there is one thing that is actually bothering me lately. I started to have this weirdest dream where I stand in some sort of the basement, surrounded by huge shelves with machines buzzing and blinking rhythmically. I make a couple of steps forward to see what's at the center of the room, and it's more like a who than what. It lies on the floor with a feeding tube attached to its multiple holes. There are lots of wires and screens and the other devices, the purpose of which I cannot understand. As I step closer and it splits its head in half to reveal the myriad of eyes, I can hear the thoughts forming in my head. The thoughts that aren't mine. The thoughts that don't belong to this world. I wake up instantly at this point, covered in cold sweat and tears, shaking to the bone. Each time I see that dream, and that happens every time I put my head to rest, I keep staying there longer and longer. I am afraid that at some point, there will be no return. So I beg of you, please, stay away from Metaverse when it hits the public. Yeah. Before you call me names and blame for not supporting other people's work, please hear me out. I'm not here to hear your blaming, I need your advice. Because what just happened is freaking weird, and I have a really bad feeling about this. So, yeah, I've installed a jailbreak system on my Nintendo Switch. Why? Well, I remember buying it when Zelda came out, and it was massive. I've spent hundreds of hours in that game, discovering every secret, getting every item, and Mario was pretty awesome too. And some others, I won't lie. But then the big guys got greedy and started to flood the market with half-ass crap for the price that could really bite. I mean, come on, who buys a game for $60 just to discover it's trash and there's no way to refund it? I've had enough when they started to throw the exclusive titles on PC and made them even cheaper there. Honestly, when Octopath hit Steam, I said, no more, and packed the thing back in the box. I even tried to sell it online, but nobody would pay a decent price, even with the extra games and accessories. Yes, I've lowered a price down to a point when it stopped having any sense. But even then, only some choosing beggars tried to scam my deal, asking to sell it for half of that. As a result, my console collected dust all this time up to last week when I've thought to take it out and play some newer games I had no intention to pay for. I saw a couple of videos on YouTube and some threads here on Reddit, so what the heck? Why not? Actually, it's harder than it seems. There's at least a dozen of different firmwares, and you can easily brick the device if you have no idea what you're doing. And I clearly had not. So after watching all those simple and elegant tutorials, I discovered that there's more to that. As I followed some steps on the procedure, there were differences here and there. So I reverted the whole thing before I killed my Switch with my own two hands. But then, as I've been browsing for fresher guides, or maybe better explanations from people who made it, I found the one that was actually pretty easy to install. All I had to do was A, download software and launch, B, connect my console to my PC, C, hit install, sit back, and relax. It was posted on one of the enthusiast forum by a guy holding a nickname of Phone Tom 33. I remember it just because it was a cheesy pun. Well, the whole process took me like 30 minutes to do, and voila. It booted with a pretty cool black and blue theme with some cool looking phoenix like bird on a wallpaper with small 0.2.1 version number at the corner. As a late realization came in, the thought that I've wiped all I had on the device. Games, saves, screenshots, and I had no idea if I could revert the thing, but to hell with it. Not that I would miss those crappy buys from eStore. That evening, I've downloaded and installed a couple of titles and gave it a try. It was a success even though 2 or 3 didn't launch at all. I blamed bad ROMs, and a couple more glitched from time to time. Same reason, I guess. But the rest were smooth and silky. I had my fun. Next morning, I decided to do a couple of missions in Astral Chain before my work call started. So I grabbed the controller and turned the TV on. The message popped up saying that the firmware was updated to v.0.2.2. I froze for a minute thinking, as I didn't recall enabling Wi-Fi after the install, but probably I did. I couldn't remember. Quick check of the settings showed that I actually did. My network and password were there. Yeah, I guess that's what you get when you play video games instead of a good 8-hour sleep. But what really got my attention was the game that wasn't there before. At the end of the list, there was a new thumbnail showing a yellow dog with long ears that looked sort of like Beagle or whatever, grimacing. And there was a colorful text at the bottom pronouncing the name of the game. Crapper Pupper. I believe Nintendo's Parental Advisory Committee, or whatever they are calling that unit, would have a heart attack if they would have seen it. Especially after what I saw when I launched it. It was an absolutely stupid scroll shooter where you control a flying yellow dog who, we assume, hold a name of a pupper, and flies with his ass forward. All you have to do is avoid obstacles and kill enemies such as bees, butterflies, and evil cats and vintage planes by shooting them from the... That's right, the crapper. Sending piles of shit flying through the screen. It was poorly made, felt much like somebody's Unity project rather than a formal game. There were no studio logos or credits, and I would totally ignore and forget about it if not one detail that seemed strange to me. Each time you'd lose life, the screen faded to black, showing just the number of lives left and a short message. Just like your general tips and tricks on loading screens, except the messages made absolutely no sense. One of them read, "Was it necessary?" Another was, "Don't you dare speak to her like that." And there were more like 1124. Gorgeous Fathom. And just Paul. But it was 9 already, meaning I had to be present on daily video meetings, so I put the thing aside. Later on, being curious, I've googled the name of the game, and believe me or not, nothing's there. Yeah, I know what homebrews are, so I didn't think of it as something strange or weird. Just a lame game from somebody whose humor I was not getting. I've deleted the thing and forgot about it up to the next day. Thursday morning came with another addition. Firmware version updated to 0.3.0. This time with a changelog, bug fixes here, additional themes there, and surprise surprise, another game. At that point I've decided that was like the something special developer tried to pull to make people talk about it. This time, there was a picture of a cartoon hamster. Or was it a weasel? It was hard to tell because of the comic style of the artist, and the title read 101 WEIT, with later figured out to be 101 ways to end it all. As the title screen showed up, oh man, if the first game was pretty strange, this was absolutely fucked up. It was like a party game, like Jack in a Box type of thing, or, I don't know, Mario Party. Didn't play much of those. Point is, you compete against your friends, passing the controllers in different approaches to end your life. Yes, you read it right. It was an end your life party game no matter how stupid it sounds. The graphics were not really detailed, but it definitely seemed that the thing had budged. and I was really impressed by what whoever those they could be, did to controls. They squeezed everything they could out of Joy-Cons. I don't want to go into much of a detail, but there were a couple of levels, like the one where you had to jump in front of the train. Player is supposed to hold Joy-Cons in each hand and make a swing at a last possible moment when the train comes. The faster the swing, the harder the impact, the more points you get. Or there was that one where you had to hold one pressed to your forehead, and the other one represented the gun, and you had to pull a trigger and make a motion with your head at the same time. I tend to think of myself as a cynical person. I like dark jokes, and cyanide and happiness stuff, and horror comedies, but seriously. This thing was pretty fucked up even to my taste. So I've deleted it too. And before you ask, yes, I googled it as well. Same result. So I decided to get back to that page where I got the firmware in the first place and check out what other people think about this extra edition. There were a couple of update messages from PhoneTom33 and a couple of comments with issues and praises, but nobody mentioned the homebrew games. Oh, okay. Then probably nobody really found them that amusing, or simply deleted them without launching. Wasn't my thought at that time. I played some more normal ones that evening and made sure to delete the 101 WEIT. Friday crawled in. It was busy all day. I had to make calls, fill in stuff, and it doesn't really matter at this point. Later that evening, I cracked open a cold one and grabbed a controller. I bet you've guessed what was there. A new update and a new game. This time the changelog mentioned only that the issues with Xenoblade Chronicles DLCs were fixed, and the game name was Banker Simulator. The thumbnail contained a title and a stylized photo of a hand of a person wearing a business suit, with a $sign cuff link on a shirt, holding a briefcase with dollar bills sticking out of it. Well, I thought, at least this time it looks normal. So I've decided to give it a try. I'm not a big fan of financial strategies or anything goes here simulators, but I was curious at the time. As the game started, I saw the thighs of a man dressed in gray business suit. He was sitting on a brown leather couch. It was a first-person view as if he was looking down. A smooth jazz music played in the background. I jiggled the controller a couple of times, but nothing happened. That was just stupid. What was the point? Then a tooltip popped up. Please take Joy-Cons in each of your hands. Okay. I did, and then it got to me. I had to manipulate each hand individually, so I did. The left palm of the banker dude had a smoldering cigar, and the right one, a glass of brown liquid. I assumed that meant to be whiskey or something. And all I could do in this game was either smoke the cigar or sip from the glass. I tried to make him stand up or reach to a pocket. Just do anything so that game could start or whatever. But it was just smoking and sipping. If I'd smoke the cig or drop it beyond my vision, as well as drinking up whiskey or pouring it to the floor, the legs of a waitress appeared at the edge of my vision, meaning I could see only her ankles and high heels, and the voice actress asked, "More whiskey? Or another cigar?" My character replied with, and either item reappeared in one of the hands. That was so dumb. No more hints or instructions. At some point I thought the whole thing glitched, so I've restarted it a couple of times with no result. I was pissed at the game for being moronic, at myself for not being able to understand how it works, at that guy who patched it into update. So at some point I just overturned the glass onto my character and ditched the lit cigar just onto those fancy Prada pants or whatever they are wearing. The scream started as the cloth must have catched fire, and when the waitress legs again. More whiskey? The screen faded to black with screams continuing to sound from my TV upstairs. and some lines of white text began to print. It burns. It burns. It burns. You get the point. I'm not a drama queen, but something there got me. I deleted the game, made sure I blocked the internet connection in settings, and went online to drop a message to the developer. There were no PMs on that site, so I left a comment in the thread. Hey Phone Tom 33. Thanks for your work and such, but could you please stop adding those stupid games to each update patch? They are plain idiotic. Thanks. It took him 20 minutes to answer. What games? Can you believe it? What a moron. Trying to be mysterious and all. The one about the shitting dog and that take your own life thing and this piece of shit called Banker Simulator. Those games. 2 minutes later, some random user replied, Dude, are you high or something? There are no games. And somebody named Irwin followed. Yeah, there is no spoon, Neo. Get some sleep, noob. Yeah, what a bunch of jerks. Making fun of a man just because he's a newbie in their playground. Fuck it. I'll delete the whole thing tomorrow. That was what I thought when I went to bed. Yet Saturday came and I grabbed the controller automatically. I was bored and I slept the whole incident over. And it was my mistake, as it was just then when shit hit the fan. I've booted the console and was just about to launch some dragon builders to sink some time, but I've noticed there was yet another game I have no memory of. Except this time there was no thumbnail. Just a blank white square with plain black text of a title on it. I checked the settings. Wi-Fi was, as I left it, off and gone. I thought that probably it downloaded in background as I was playing yesterday. Or, specifically speaking, partially downloaded as the thumbnail seemed broken. I decided to check out if it would launch and let that be a fat dot between me and my experience with these updates. The title read, Mighty Mark and the Quest for Bone Marrow. Who the fuck comes up with stuff like this? The loading screen consisted of a black background and the main character running at the bottom right corner of the screen. He was a cartoonish dude wearing a purple suit, sunglasses, and a Viking helmet plus a baseball bat strapped to his back. Well, the game loaded and I must say at that time it didn't look so bad. It has a nice starting screen, simple yet stylish 2D graphics and cool music. Except that title made no sense. Kinda looked friendly without noticing it. And to my surprise, it was quite a fun game. It was an action platformer where you controlled Mark in his adventure over the Broken Kingdom. The levels were varied. There were a bunch of mini games. You could collect coins and buy upgrades. It looked fun. I've actually spent a couple of hours and made it to World 3. I even started to like the voiceovers. The guy who voiced Mark spat out jokes and puns, mocking the enemies. At some point, I felt a crave to grab some food from the fridge, but to my surprise, as I've hit start, nothing happened. Mark just shouted, "No time to rest," and I was forced to end the level without pause. That was strange, but, you know, maybe that's the devs and their sense of immersion. After a quick bite, I've grabbed the controller again. I must have lost the track of time as I was deep in the gameplay. I haven't played such a good platformer in a long time, but as the clock was counting down to midnight, and I was in World 6, it was a good idea to call it a night. So I've pressed pause to return to the main menu. I mean, I wanted to press pause, but nothing happened. My thumb didn't move. It felt like I caught cramps in my right palm, so I've decided to put the controller aside and warm it up a bit. Nothing. I just couldn't take my hands off the controller. I panicked. What if I blocked some blood vessel or moved clumsy and now my hand is paralyzed and I need some medical attention? Yeah, not the brightest thought, but you weren't there and I'm not a doctor. So as I winded myself up, I just began to wiggle my body furiously from side to side, trying to get rid of the device in my hands. At some point I succeeded, and the thing slipped and fell onto the carpet beneath my feet. What happened next? I have no explanation for this. I've immediately felt all the blood of my body leaning towards my temples, banging with pressure into my ears. Instantly it became impossible to draw another breath, and I felt my lungs burning. Dark spots and red circles started to dance before my eyes, and I heard the voice. Mighty Mark started to chant in his badass manner. Pick me up, pick me up. I was dying on my couch, straight out of nowhere, just like that. And yes, the thing I did was irrational. I folded in half and picked up the controller from the floor. The very same moment I heard my body letting the air back in. With the heart pounding like as if I was the speaker on a rave party, I stared at the screen, completely horrified. What the fuck just happened? Did I have a stroke? Next thing I heard was, "Alright, let's do this," from the speakers. And the game continued. I don't know how it would end if not less than 4 minutes later the clock beeped midnight. The game auto-paused, but the character didn't. He stood there in his idle pose, leaning from left to right with the bat in his hand. And I heard as follows. "Alright, Mighty Mark says night-night. Let's continue our adventure tomorrow and crush some skulls. See you, fella. And you'd better be there." And then the switch turned off. I have no fucking clue what I have just experienced back there. I was never a believer. I don't believe in God, superstition, ghosts, or any of those tales, but I have absolutely no rational explanation for what happened yesterday. Today is Sunday. I ignored the thing the whole day and decided to drop you guys a message, as I don't know what to do. Do you think it's bad? Or am I just being a wuss? Hold on. As I'm writing this line, I see a reflection in my monitor of my TV behind. It went on by itself. I don't want to turn and check. I am so tired of insomnia. Every night it's the same thing. I lie awake, unable to just drift off to sleep in my bed. I know I'm not supposed to use my phone at all when I'm trying to sleep, but I usually have a creepypasta playing in the background. But every night, sleep always teases me for what feels like forever whenever I'm laying in bed. It starts to get annoying at around midnight. Typically every night around then, I'll fall asleep edging on before it suddenly goes away. I don't know if that's normal, but it's like a slow burn building to instant awakeness. Not a word, sue me. It's like when you fall asleep in a chair and zone out for a bit and feel that scary dropping sensation. Only it's not as scary as that. Nothing about it is even scary. Not even the creepypastas, to be honest. It's a bad habit I got into when I was a teenager, and I can't break out of it for some reason as an adult. It usually calmed me listening to whatever was supposed to be scary. Maybe I just liked someone talking when I slept. I don't know. I've been obsessed with horror since I was a child, so there's not a lot of things just words can do to scare me, if that makes sense. I wasn't exactly shivering under my covers in fear with the latest. I work security at night in an abandoned factory. You won't believe the rules I have to follow. Story I was listening to, but it did really help me lull off better than white noise. It's really just words at the end of the day. Nothing is really going to hurt you. You're just letting your brain feel some weird chemical response to the story if the writer is any decent. Sometimes I'll get a little nervous and turn the flashlight on my phone and check my room real fast. Nothing is ever there. I was just being dumb. It's honestly pretty funny considering I'm a grown man. Like, what am I checking for? Boogeyman? That was the situation last night. I was doing my usual terrible routine of listening to creepypastas, and I once again got a little nervous. I picked up my phone to start checking. My eyes adjusted to the bright and unnatural light of my screen while I scrolled down to select the flashlight. Once I clicked it on and saw the room empty, I felt some relief when I saw my empty room. Nothing was unusual, so I turned on the light and turned my phone face down on my bed. My world was suddenly just darkness once again, and the narrator's voice was losing its meaning. I was in a point of consciousness where you're just about to lose it. The world was drifting away nice and slow, and all I had to do was relax. What if there's a maniac in your room with you right now? Shut up, brain. Please just, for tonight, just shut up. What if there's a maniac and they just have been here for a while? I hate you so much. It's not even possible, dummy. I would 100% notice if someone was here with me. Remember that thing you saw on YouTube about the guy who had a homeless woman in his house? Kind of. Remember she would wait until he was asleep and then eat some food and walk around his place? Yeah, but that's not even scary because I could easily fight a homeless woman off. I would only get a little startled. You're doing a bad job. I'm basically already asleep. But what about the stories we don't hear about? What about the guys who do it and get away with it? Think about it. They could be right here. My dumb brain managed to make me nervous again despite how dumb I knew I would feel. I tiredly reached for my phone again. You're getting harder to sneak up on. I heard a dry voice say from behind me. Is it possible you remember? No, can't be. The voice was supposed to be a woman's, I think, but it definitely was not human. It was dry with a reverb, like she was multiple people with the same voice speaking at the same time. I felt whatever it was behind me, and I wanted to scream, but the world had begun melting away. None of it felt real at all. I couldn't move at all, but that wasn't my main fear. It was the intense need to sleep at that moment. I was fighting it with every ounce of my strength just to keep my eyelids open, but sleep was pulling me in. I'll need to figure out whatever this is. The thing spoke to itself as I was drifting off. Before you become a problem for the others. When I closed my eyes, I figured I would die right there, but I was greeted with another sunshine once I opened them again. I didn't feel different at all. I felt refreshed, actually, and I didn't even remember it all at first today. I went to work just like usual and did my regular things until I randomly remembered while I was eating dinner. I'm not anywhere close to my bed right now, and I doubt I will be anytime soon. In fact, every light is on in my apartment, and I am checking and rechecking locks. Although I fear this may not just be an intruder. Didn't even feel real when I think about it sometimes, but then I remember how helpless I felt, and I don't want to risk it. It's going to suck going to work when the sun comes up with no sleep, but I have no choice for now. If anyone has suggestions, I am more than open. If I take this to anyone, I'll get put in a nut house, and I don't know if I would like that. Man, I am so tired. There's nothing I would rather have than sleep right now. I need to find a way to feel safe while I grab some sleep. Hopefully I don't slip up until I figure something out. I don't think I want to know what it looks like. I just looked in the mirror, and I look like shit. My hair is unkempt, and my eyes are sunken with dark bags beneath. I feel waves of emotion crashing into me as my body screams to me for just one thing. Please, just get some sleep. That's all you need, is a good night's sleep. Okay, so I just want to preface this story with a disclaimer. An ASOS gift card is obviously not life or death, but an ASOS gift card that you won in a Twitter giveaway with 200 quid on it is pretty high stakes. That being said, what we had to go through to retrieve said ASOS gift card, which we did, was pretty fucked up. So let's start properly. Just to give you a bit of context, this story involves me, Erica, who is the one getting married. She's an accountant. Our friend from school, Prem, and Beth, her cousin, who has just finished a classical archaeology degree at UCL. A bit of a mixed bag, really. Cutting to the chase here. We're at a hen do it in Paris. Hanging outside a warehouse rave on the trendy side of town, and I've just fallen arse over tit and dropped my ASOS gift card from down a grate. The guy outside the warehouse who's in charge of the guest list nodded us towards a slimy set of steps. The steps led towards a yawning opening in the stone wall. The man told us, in English better than our French, that if we headed through the opening, it would take us under the ground and into a disused sewer. If we wandered about half a mile or so, for 15 minutes, it would take us directly under the grate where I dropped my card. It was completely dry under there, he said. It hadn't been used as part of the sewage system in over 70 years. He proved this to us. He took out a 50-cent coin and dropped it down the drain. We heard it cling against the dry concrete beneath, without a hint of a splash. I'll be real with you. If any of us were even close to being sober, we wouldn't have considered it, but we were drunk and God knows what else. It was exciting. Erica was more buzzed than me. What a story to tell at the wedding, she said. It was like that horror film, As Above, So Below, she said. Only that we weren't going to the catacombs, only an old sewer, and what self-reflecting demon would haunt a sewer over a catacomb? Exactly, so let's go. We made our way down the steps, still giggling from the adrenaline and clutching onto the cold, slippery handrail that ran along the length of the river wall. It was a freezing cold night, but the minute we stepped into the opening, we felt a gust of warmth. Like getting off a plane into a hot country. We headed down into the opening. It was roasting hot at this point, but completely pitch black. All we had were phone torches, which weren't a huge amount of use. That's why I almost missed my gift card lying on the floor. It was as the guy said. I looked up and there was a grid shining down the street below. I snatched up my card from the ground and put it into my pocket. When I heard Prem shriek, it echoed around the tunnel and our eyes were drawn to the opening in the side of the wall. It wasn't there before. We were drunk and I can be pretty dozy sometimes, but there was no way that we could have missed it unless it had just appeared. I don't know. It was glowing with the light of about 20 candles. A 50s style dressing table with a girl sitting at it, doing her makeup. She was in a long white dress and a veil, and she was beaming, just making eye contact with herself in the mirror, and absolutely buzzing by the looks of it. It wasn't a doorway into an apartment or anything, just an entrance to another dank, pitch-black tunnel with a bloody dressing table in the middle of it. We were absolutely silent for a minute, until Erica spoke up. She was never one for an awkward silence, even if that was clearly the only option. "Are you okay?" she asked. And the girl snapped around and looked at her directly, making us all jump. I started to back away slightly, but the girl opened her mouth. I thought she was about to speak, but she just froze, mouth open in a smile, eyes wide, waiting. She looked at each of us in turn, mouth still open until Beth finally cracked and asked her if we could help. The girl said something. No idea. It was in a complete foreign language, and I couldn't even hazard a guess at which one. And it was loud. Being in a dark tunnel, it feels like you have to whisper, but she basically screamed and her high voice bounced off the stone walls. I looked at everyone else and they were all looking as bewildered as me, but Beth was as white as a sheet. There was a deafening scraping as the girl got to her feet. She smiled at us. She laughed at us. A horrible, breathy giggle, and she started to head into the depths of the side tunnel, dragging the stool she was sitting on with her. No one followed her. We waited until the scraping noises had faded into the dark before we turned to leave. Prem went to have a look at the dressing table, but Beth's hand on his shoulder stopped him. It was mega weird. Ordinary on a night out, if you're somewhere dark or weird or isolated, and you see a girl on your own, you try and stick with her, get her to come with you, or at least call someone to keep an eye on her. But none of us seemed to bother. I barely remember getting out of the tunnel, actually. Only that we managed to flag down a taxi to take us back to the Airbnb. We chatted about it once we got back, of course. Maybe deciding that she was high or drunk or part of a weird underground cult or something. Whatever. Beth mentioned something before we went to bed. She hadn't said a word up to this point until we asked her if she was okay. She said the girl spoke Assyrian Aramaic, the ancient language she was studying in university. She said that it was the original language of the Bible, the original language that Jesus and his followers would have spoken. Beth said that there were discrepancies over pronunciation and the majority of the syntax, that this language hadn't been spoken properly for over thousands of years. Beth herself didn't understand it fully, but she managed to pick up on 3 words: deeper, darker, and one that could either mean rebirth or rise. As I've said, we were pretty drunk. I don't really remember going to bed, just that we went straight to the airport the next day, and no one has mentioned it since. We were probably right. She was just some drunk girl. Or not, but it's really not worth dwelling on. It's not the most uncommon thing to find yourself at the receiving end of a horror story in a public gathering. After all, everybody has their ghosts, don't they? And it's only natural for them to want to share what haunts them with anybody who might listen. Makes one feel like they're not alone in this. Everybody has a little experience they can't explain, or a faint memory that just doesn't make a lot of sense while still seeming very real. Most of the time we brush it off as a hallucination. Maybe you just heard it wrong. Of course, a man in white clothing wasn't standing in the middle of the stairwell you just passed. And of course, they are just bad dreams. Nothing more. What else would they be? They certainly don't explain the marks all across your legs, but that's okay. You find a way to rationalize that as well. Every single time. At the end of the day, we all have stories of the unexplained. Weird mishaps that just can't be understood. And we deem them just as that. Stories. But what if you find yourself living through one of those stories? You experience the horrors they promise firsthand. Dread slithers in your bones and fear takes over you. Yet you keep telling yourself this isn't real. None of this is. Yet, if it isn't real, then what possible explanation do you hold for the terror you're feeling? Oh, what's that you say? You haven't faced fear like that. Ever? Well, allow me to change that for you. Come, don't be shy. Take a walk with me. Let me paint you a picture. Try to live through it, okay? Let's start by imagining ourselves in a quiet Indian village. It's not the shabbiest establishment, not by a far shot, but it's not the most advanced living either. What little development this place sees is a mere echo of what it should have seen. Somewhere along the system, the money meant for your little village drained into the pockets of this figure of authority or that. But that doesn't concern you. You still like it here. You've grown used to this place over time. You want change, but change is scary, you recall. Do you want change? You think you do, but what would you even change about this place? The buildings? The education provided? Maybe some health facilities even? Or would you change the traditions? The way locals have lived here for hundreds of years? Do you have what it takes to change that? And with it, everything that village stands for. You probably don't, but who knows? Maybe one day you might. This isn't important though. The important thing is that you're living in this place for decades now. Yet this little slice of rural India keeps surprising you every once in a while. You keep every mapped inch of it. Heck, you even know the unmapped parts. The arcane bits, the parts that get lost in the dark. The ones that nobody dares put into words. Although, someone does it. It's human nature after all. If there's a story, it needs to be recorded. It needs to be printed deep inside everyone's memory to make sure it lives on through the ravages of time. Your village has a few local legends that nobody likes to talk about. The legends of dark, hidden places. These are the unmapped parts of your village. Over the years, it feels almost like talking about them has become taboo. This doesn't stop the whispers from spreading. How could it? Whispers, much like water, flow through the smallest of cracks, and in the dark of the night these whispers make their way to those who lend their ears to it. The adults talk among themselves, half believing these legends purely because they grew up listening to them every day. Later they would tell these stories to their kids, trying to keep their kids alive should any of these terrifying horrors be true. But on a deeper level, keeping the stories of the village alive for further generations to come as well. You are no different than them. You, like everybody else, have heard these stories and have subconsciously learned to coexist with them. You take every suggested precaution without even realizing. You keep living your life here, and it is all very normal. That is, if you ignore the whispers, the damning relentless whispers. They always find you. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Even if it takes a few years, they will come for you. Just like they come for everyone else. Finally, one night your worst fears come to life. You have had nightmares about this. You have been conditioned for this. And under the covers, your elders have rigorously taught you how to get out of this. If one unfortunate day this actually happens. You know what to do here. At least, you believe you do. You weren't doing anything peculiar when it began. It was a fine winter evening, and you were on your bicycle coming home from work. Night had fallen early, as it tended to do in these cold months. Work was slow and you were bored out of your wits, but you managed to survive another day there, and now you were free to go to the comforts of your house. It wasn't even that late, but the darkness had only strengthened the whispers, and the whispers had compelled even the sanest of the individuals to hide away in the safety of their homes, full of light, with their families that brought them joy. They preferred it this way and tried with every breath to be miles away from whatever they thought lurked in the dead of night. Nobody could confirm whether the stories were true or not, and nobody dared be the one to fact-check it. You, sadly, didn't have the liberty of being locked inside your own place before sundown. So there you were, in the dark, putting up a brave face for whoever could see while hoping nobody did. You had been cycling for a while now, and fatigue was slowly taking over. You figured you could just get off the bike and push it home. It wasn't that far away now. So you start treading, humming a little to yourself, watching the path that lay ahead of you as the moonlight illuminated it. Making your way across town, you reach a massive old tree, and having already been on the road for the past hour, you decide it would be okay to sit down under it. With your back against the tree, you close your eyes, and suddenly you heard a slight rustle of the leaves above you. Your eyes shot open as the words of the villagers come swarming back to your ears. Don't sit under the trees at night. Spirits reside in their branches. They will take you away, never to be seen again, the voices say. You try to shake it off. telling yourself it's nothing more than a superstition. Somehow you find yourself standing up, taking your bicycle, and hightailing out of there towards home. You're trying not to think of their words, but they have obviously spooked you. You start muttering a prayer. It's said this prayer wards off the evil spirits, and you are willing to take whatever aid you can get right now. A little while later, you come across an intersection, and in the middle of it stands a woman. A white sari drapes her entire body, and a veil covers every bit of her being except for her mouth. The unforeseen appearance of this lady makes you jump, and you breathe in deeply to bring yourself back to your senses. You look up trying to comprehend what is standing in front of you, and then all of a sudden, in one bright moment of flashbulb memory, you recall what your elders taught you. They warned you about a woman in white standing in the middle of the road at a time of the one night when no soul with any sense would dare step out. She would seem harmless, and for the most part she is. She seems to be calling out to you, but you barely understand what she is saying. You were always instructed not to go out in the dark if you can help it. However, you were also taught not to run away should you meet this woman. Much like a lot of other things, running away is an invitation for her. You turn your back on her without greeting her, and she will take that as a signal to pursue you. That is never supposed to end well. Instead, if you are down on your luck so bad that you find this old lady, you go up to her and listen to her. Don't talk. Never talk. Just listen to what she has to say. More often than not, she will ask you to drop her off somewhere. Maybe at the bus stop or at the railway station. Wherever she wants to go. Accept without a single word and don't say anything. Engaging in conversation is an invitation too. Just gesture at her to follow. If you're in a vehicle, she'll sit behind you. Otherwise, she'll just keep walking right by your side. Against your better judgment, you do as you have been taught. You walk to her and listen as she begs you to take her to the old railway station. You know it's defunct now and no one ever really visits there anymore, but you dare not point this out at that moment. So you just gesture at her, accepting her plea for help. Happily, she sits behind you, and you start walking when you remember one other detail. Fire. That was the key to surviving this encounter. You don't smoke, but the seeds of fear sown by the rural legends in your childhood grew as plants of paranoia in you. This meant no matter where you went, you took a pocket lighter with you. Little did you know, it would come in handy. You were slightly confused as to where all the fluid went because you don't smoke and you barely use the lighter. So what could have happened to it? It wasn't the time to debate about your imaginary usage of the lighter, so you shake your head and start moving. You tell yourself it is okay. You don't actually have to go to the old station. All you have to do is make it to your own home. Once you're there, you can just let the woman stay outside and she'll go away on her own. That's how it's always been. You just need to go home. Slowly pushing, you look at your source of light and realize that you should technically be safe. You hadn't broken any rules so far, and you definitely had more than enough fuel in your lighter to get you home. From your estimates, the lighter should run for at least 20 more minutes, and you were a bare 10-minute walk away from security and comfort. You start feeling good about your chances of survival. You've prepared for this after all. The woman sitting behind you keeps talking about one thing or the other. You try not to pay any attention to her words as you silently keep repeating the prayer of Lord Hanuman from earlier. Although something feels off. Maybe it's the fact that you can feel her eyes on you from under the veil. Or maybe it's the fact that despite hearing a constant lively chatter from behind you, it still very much seems as if her mouth isn't moving at all. You're scared. Confident, but scared. You want to turn around to see her once just to make sure. You don't know what you would want to make sure, but you just do. Showing tremendous willpower, you manage not to turn around. You're not supposed to look at the old lady. Everyone is aware of that. You simply do not turn back. Turning back equals surrender. You don't want to surrender, so you keep going. After 5 or maybe 6 minutes, you reach another intersection. Your house is straight ahead, and the old railway station on your right. You keep going straight while the woman protests from behind you. She's still not hostile, and soon quiets down on her own, falling back to her old chittering about nothing in particular, and you keep moving on silently. It's been a long time since you left for home, and a mixture of panic and fear is being reflected in the beads of sweat that sit heavy on your neck, on the little droplets. You keep feeling the woman's breath from time to time. It's icy and sends slight shivers down your body, but you have no choice here, except putting on a brave face and continuing walking. After an elapsed period of time, you notice a change in the atmosphere. It's still dark, and the air is still chilly, but everything seems denser now. The air feels heavier, colder. It has gotten harder to tread through it, almost as if you're facing a slight resistance. But that's not all. The darkness too differs now. For starters, the moonlight has disappeared. The moon is still there, clear as day, but it isn't illuminating your surroundings or your path anymore, as it has turned its back towards you, and the darkness is overpowering everything now. Whatever the case may be, you're unable to see anything around you, except for the tiny glow of your lighter. But this doesn't make sense. So you try to shake the feeling off, reminding yourself that your house isn't far away. The lighter is about to run out, and you begin to feel like you are moving in a loop now. You, scarcely optimistic, pushing your bicycle by its handles, with a lighter in one hand and a strange woman sitting behind you in the carrier of your cycle, talking incessantly and breathing down your neck, sending chills down your spine. All of this is happening inside a small, safe bubble of orange illumination, and you are aware that outside this bubble is nothing but darkness that has come to life. More time has passed and you're still not home, even though you should have been. It scares you more than you already were, but you know not to lose your cool. Don't talk to her. Don't turn back. Don't stop praying. You keep reminding yourself, but that doesn't help settle the increasingly stronger waves of panic. You glance at your lighter, only to see that it's out of fuel. What's keeping the fire burning then? You ask yourself, knowing you have no possible explanation for it. Perhaps just a pebble of luck thrown in an ocean of a misfortune that you are drowning in. Nonetheless, you're not complaining. In this hour, you'll take whatever aid you can get, no questions asked. Whatever is keeping you alive as you move towards your house with it appears to be a lady who isn't acting hostile yet, is bound to run out, and as soon as that happens, you'll learn if she is actually hostile or not. You murmur and pray that you don't have to learn this tonight. The fire is the only thing keeping you alive. There is no definite proof the thing behind you isn't hostile, but then again, there's no proof that it is. You know you don't want to risk it, so you keep going, and finally the darkness lifts and the moonlight returns, giving you a sight of where you are. As you look around, you see an old metal banner with something written on it. It's almost illegible, having been beaten down to its current crumbling condition by years of wear and tear with no maintenance. At last, you're able to read the words with some effort, and reading them sends you in a shock. It's the old railway station. You can't figure out how you got here. The only place you shouldn't have gotten to. It makes no sense, but then again, nothing has been making sense ever since you got this lovely passenger on your back. Trembling slightly, you keep going, intending to stop only at the gate of the station now. A light breeze starts up and you don't even feel it. The tingling fear in your bones numbing everything else. You eventually take note of it, only to see the lighter's flame is getting restless. Dread starts setting in your very soul as you start to realize your luck has run out. And just then, the lighter goes off. You stop moving immediately. Click. Nothing happens. You try again, more desperate. Click, click. Still nothing. The lighter remains unlit. You look around in a panic, unsure what to do. Click, click. A few sparks. Not enough for a fire, but they do give you some hope. Click, click, click. More sparks, more hope. Yet the hope is as long-lived as the sparks. It appears and it flickers away. Not enough. Deep in your bones, you know that nothing is going to help you now. You grow increasingly desperate. Your lighter clicks become more and more frantic. And then you hear it, a low growl, coming from right behind you, accompanied by labored breathing. There's something about this growl you just heard. You know this growl isn't solitary. There is a toothy grin that you can feel without even turning back. Yet you are sure the old lady is baring her teeth. And every strand of your existence screams at you to just run away from there. But your body is frozen in place. You know this is the end of the line for you. In your last moments, you make a decision. If you die right here, right now, you want to see what kills you. You want to be able to look your death in the eyes before succumbing to it. You start to turn around to face whatever sits on your carrier as the voices of everyone you have ever met in your village come to you. All of them are saying the same thing. Every single one of them tells you not to do it. Turning around goes against everything you've been taught. Years and years of teaching has imprinted on your brain the fact that no matter what, you are not supposed to turn around. However, you realize this is the end, and at this point, turning around or not is the only thing left under your control. In a split second, you make the call and turn around, lighter in your hand, only to see the same innocent-looking old woman in a white saree, with a veil covering her entire body but her mouth. The next moment, you hear a slash as if a blade tearing through something. You look down to find a deep cut running through your body. The next moment, you hear the sound of a bicycle falling. Following that is the fainter sound of your precious lighter crashing on the dirt. Finally, you hear the heavy thud of an adult body hitting the ground. You look at the body laying at your feet, and it's you. But you are still standing still, unable to understand what's happening. Looking up, you see the woman fading, her mouth turned in a smile that's difficult for you to place. It isn't a happy smile, but it's also not a sad one. It's haunting. The smile. It's a smile that you know will keep coming back in your dreams. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. But she will smile at you again, and you know it. Your body is crumpled up on the ground. It's probably living the last dream of its existence. Then, as if nothing happened, your body rises up, the wound on its chest healed. Even the clothes are spotless. It picks up the bicycle and then the lighter. It looks at you, and it smiles. It's the same smile as that of the woman. With that, the body is gone. It walks away with the bicycle, and you're left there, not feeling much of anything anymore. No pain, no fear, just an emptiness. You stand there for an endless amount of time waiting for something to happen. You keep waiting, but when nothing happens, you resolve to go away from this place. You walk up to the tree where you first sat down on this unfortunate night, and you sit there once again. As the sun rises, you start to fade. And as soon as the light of the sun leaves, there you are again, in the darkness. However, soon something happens, and it's not something you could have guessed in any possible manner. The legends of your village changed. The old lady from the intersection has faded from everybody's memory. Everybody but yours. You remember her bright as the day. You remember her taking your body and leaving you alone on the abandoned railway station on a cold raven black night. The tales of the old lady are now replaced by those of a lone man. Nobody tells you about it. Nobody knows you are dead. How could they? Your body is still out there while you're here, spending countless days and nights hoping someone is unlucky enough to have no choice but to stumble out at night. You don't want to hurt them. Not at all. You're gentle. You just want the directions to the old railway station. My grandfather always struck me as a peculiar man. I did love him, don't get me wrong, but it always seemed as if there was a side of him that I never got to see. He was always more firm and stuck in his ways. He would babysit me when my parents were out on date night, as well as the odd weekend I'd spend at his house. Instead of watching a movie together or going to get ice cream, we would prefer to tell stories. Not the known childhood stories such as Hansel and Gretel or Little Red Riding Hood. No, his stories were true. Although a lot of them seemed far-fetched, and I never really believed them until I had an experience of my own. You see, my grandfather was a World War II veteran, and he was very opinionated on warfare in general, as well as the US military. He would tell me stories of monsters prowling the battlefield at night, the screams of those left for dead in no man's land, as they were left for dead. As a child, those stories would scare me, but I never really believed them to be true, although my grandfather showed no signs of dementia, and never really did up until the day he died. I suppose I just didn't want to believe his stories. He told me of the Watchers, glowing eyes that would stare at them from afar during the night, creatures which only manifested where great amounts of bloodshed occurred. There would be two men posted each night to stare back. What would happen if there wasn't? He never knew, but one night, while my grandfather was on watch, he noticed the eyes suddenly disappear, and within minutes the screams from the German trenches filled the air. And then eerie silence. The next day the German troops had simply vanished, their supplies and munitions remaining, as well as the odd patch of blood, but every single German soldier gone. I guess that night the two posted watchmen didn't keep their eyes trained on the Watchers, and whatever grim fate they had suffered, well, that's best left unknown. Though my grandfather told me many grim and terrifying stories from his time in war, the story that always stuck with me began on our home soil right here in the USA. My grandfather was 14 when the war had started. He told me about seeing the news, the papers detailing what was happening overseas. He wondered why the United States hadn't gotten involved yet. He was fed all that wartime propaganda. He read that the Nazis were evil folk with distasteful ideas, and he hated them. And as any young American teen at that time, he itched to join the war, his grandiose ambitions giving him an ego. He would often boast about how many Nazis he was going to kill in front of his older brother. My grandfather would say that he's embarrassed, that he was a naive child who was fed all sorts of lies just as everybody else was, and he lapped them up. Once the US had joined the war, my grandfather was eager to sign up, but being too young, he wasn't allowed to. However, his brother was 19, and so he went to war, writing letters to my grandfather detailing his experiences, speaking about missing home. After a few months, the letters had stopped. My grandfather, believing his brother to be dead, burned with hot rage towards the Germans and Japanese, wanting nothing more than to join his older brother and share the glory. A couple of his classmates had already signed up, lying about their age, and he planned on doing the same. That was until his brother came home. He had been shot in the leg while attempting to escape the massacre of his entire squad at the hand of the Nazis, and left to die in a ditch. He had only survived by using his belt as a tourniquet. He had been found half dead by his comrades the next day, his leg having to be amputated to save his life. He was sent back home, and straight away, he was noticeably different, as if he had left more than his leg behind in the war. His brother would scream and cry at night, and during the day he would just sit there on the couch, barely even looking in anybody's direction. Well, they had all been close before his brother had went off to fight, regularly playing together and talking nonsense. He couldn't even get a sentence out of his brother. The same rage he had upon believing his brother to be dead now burned brighter than ever. He hated those who had broken his brother, feeling as though he was required to avenge them. He discussed signing up with his brother. Upon mentioning this, his brother simply stared at him with fear and anger. "Are you fucking stupid? Do you not see what happened to me over there? It's fucking hell. There's nothing but death and misery. Don't sign up. Please don't fucking sign up," he said. My grandfather was quite taken aback. He had thought his brother would be proud of him, the courage leaving him just as quickly as it had developed. His brother persisted until he caved and promised not to sign up. Although he still hated the enemy, the fact had taken his brother from him. One night he woke up to a loud bang. Startling him, he left his room with his baseball bat in hand, wandering down the corridor and entering his brother's room. He saw a monster crawling across the floor, missing a leg and half of its face. Upon seeing this, he jumped back and screamed, his parents spreading out of their bedroom and to his side. His mother screamed when she saw him. My grandfather's brother had attempted to end his life with a shotgun, only he hadn't completed the job, blowing half of his face off in his attempt. His brother bled out soon after that, and the coming days were filled with pain, confusion, and anger, burning hotter than ever. Being 17 now, my grandfather decided he would sign up and avenge his brother. Heading down to the recruitment office after leaving a note to his parents, he felt a hint of guilt, breaking that last promise he had made his brother who never really came back from those war-torn fields in Europe, who had seen and experienced more than he could handle. Arriving in Europe soon after, he felt nothing. Upon seeing the wounded, the conditions they would be living in, he felt as if he was a dead man already. He'd go on to see the Watchers, his brothers in arms dying all around him. He said it could very well have been him. He finally understood what his brother had tried to warn him about, and he wished he had heeded those words. But the one experience that stuck out in all of this, the one thing that assisted my grandfather changing his mindset, is when he encountered a German soldier mid-battle, a boy around the same age as him, fear in his eyes, dropping his weapon and raising his hands. My grandfather had shot him anyway. It was about revenge and glory, but the boy's face plagued his sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see those tears in his eyes, the trembling of his hands as he raised them above his head, and then him dying on the floor. It could have been him. And the same situation had likely happened with many young men on both sides before. The Germans weren't this evil presence. They weren't monsters. They were men and boys who believed they were protecting their homeland just as they were. My grandfather came back from the war, but he always says that a part of him never did. A part of his heart and soul died screaming on the ground with that boy he had killed. The moral of this story isn't about the beast that prowled those fields death at night, and it doesn't include any heroic actions. It's not some fantasy. It's real. These things happened. Boys died crying out for their mothers as they bled to death. Men kissed pictures of their loved ones for the last time. Men on both sides believing they were doing what was right. The men who had sent them to their terrible fate sitting at home comfortably sipping brandy while they crawled in the dirt and blood amongst the corpses of their own friends, their brothers. And what's worse is it didn't end with World War II. Men are still sent to their deaths, sent to crawl in filth, laying down their lives for rich men who wouldn't do the same for them, being fed lies like, this is for the greater good, or you're serving your country. Vietnam is a prime example. A war fought over rice, invading a foreign land they had no business in, sending them to their deaths only to ultimately lose the war, killing children and women. And when those men came home, did they receive a hero's welcome? Did the wounded receive help for the trauma they had suffered? No. Why do you think so many of them are on the streets? Why do you think there are so many videos online of people talking Vietnam vets down from offing themselves? They were tossed aside, not as men who had bravely served their country, but as men who had failed to push capitalistic ideals onto a country that didn't want them, failed to make the rich richer. After many years, my grandfather had realized this. Even though he had fought for his country, he was no longer under any guise that it was noble or courageous. He had told me to never sign up, never join the military and fight. Not unless our homes were under direct threat, because what you believe you will be fighting for isn't the truth. My grandfather, a wise and pained man, a man I looked up to and enjoyed spending time with, died a few years after this. I wish I had listened to his words. I wish I'd believed his stories, but I went to fight in the Afghanistan war, and I saw those eyes. Those same eyes my grandfather had described in his tales, and in that moment I knew. Everything he had told me was the absolute truth. I wish it had ended when I was shot and sent back home, but I left a piece of me behind. And something else followed me to claim what was left. I don't sleep at night anymore. Instead, keeping my eyes trained on the window, staring back at the creature lurking just outside. But even when met with such an evil, the evil of man far outweighs it. The men who send us to die in foreign lands for their own gain, those are the true monsters. If you are a veteran and are having thoughts of suicide or other mental distress, please call the national hotline at 800-273-8255, then press 1. A certified counselor will be available to speak with you. Back in the early 2000s, I was a young, attractive college girl, and I worked at a tiny coffee shop across the street from the school I was attending. It was very small and never busy, so almost all of my shifts were solo. It was a drive-through only store with an employee entrance and drive-up window at the front of the building. The bathroom was on the right side of the building and also had an exit door. It was located across campus from my apartment. I had walked to work as I often did because I was only about 5 minutes away and nice weather. I had been there for a while, bored as usual doing my homework, when a brown van pulled directly up to the window. This was odd because you're supposed to order at the speaker near the large menu display, like most drive-through experiences. It was also odd because the van was so creepy. Like a literal rape van, joke on wheels. It had blacked out windows in the back and had seen better days. 2 men stared at me from the van. The driver was an elderly man with long white hair and cold blue eyes. The passenger was a scruffy middle-aged man in an old baseball hat. I opened the window and asked if I could help them. I could smell liquor radiating from the open window of the van. The driver called me Linda and said he was happy that I was coming with them on their trip. I immediately started to have bad vibes and told him he was mistaken. He kept insisting that I was Linda and coming with them on the trip. I had never seen these men before, and I suddenly realized just how alone I was. I told them I was able to assist them with a drink order, but that I'm not Linda and I'm not going anywhere. They finally left after a few minutes and never ordered anything. I took note of the license plate and was relieved to find that it was an easy one to remember. Judy's van. I locked both doors and the drive-through window after they left. I was creeped out the rest of my shift, but didn't see the van again, so I figured it was just a strange encounter with two drunk men. Fast forward to closing time. It's dark out now, so I'm finishing up my nightly duties and gathering my things to leave. I'm still slightly creeped out from the weird men in the van, so I kept my keys in my hand after I locked the coffee shop's front door from the outside. As I turned to start walking in my apartment, that same brown van pulled quickly into the parking lot right next to me. I ran back to the front door of the coffee shop. The keys trembled in my hand. I unlocked the door, scurried into the building, and locked the door behind me. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. The bathroom had an exit to the side of the building, but no windows, so I had no idea what was happening outside at this point, or if the van was still out there. I called my roommate and told her what was happening. She said she and her boyfriend would come pick me up at the side exit. I waited in the bathroom listening through the door and heard footsteps outside. The door handle jiggled and I froze in fear, but suddenly it stopped jiggling and I heard nothing further at the door. My phone rang and it was my roommate. She was waiting outside the side exit. She said the van peeled out of the parking lot as she pulled up. I hopped in the back seat and we set out to follow the van as I called the police to report these dudes. They were driving erratically and at one point it became unsafe to continue following them, and we had to stop at a red light. The officer I spoke with said there was no record of registration for the license plate Judy's van. The officer said they would patrol the area, but that was really it. I never heard anything else about it from the police, and I never saw that brown van or those creepy men again. But I do still wonder how they knew when I'd be leaving, and how long they'd been watching me. And who was Linda? Who's Judy? And did they take a trip with these men, but meet a different fate than I did? Sometimes nostalgia can be dangerous. Let me back up a bit. When I was younger, I used to live in a gold rush town. It was founded in 1820 and it became extremely popular due to its abundant riches. But that was all in the past. When I was living there, most people had left. Every last bit of gold was drained and the ones who remained still looked for it. Of course, being pretty far away from the cities, we had our share of tales. Ones of haunted mine shafts, abandoned houses with dead bodies, and much more. Even if you weren't that into scary stories, you definitely heard of the midnight train which went through the town on the rails that cut right through it. Legend says that at exactly 12:15 a.m., a train would pass through looking for passengers. When I learnt of this, I told my parents. They laughed it off as just an urban legend, but in the night, I'd always see them hurriedly closing the blinds, afraid that something would be out there. A few years later, my friends and I decided to test this out for ourselves and wait for it. It felt like forever, and almost all of them chickened out. The ones left were me and this little boy named William. Finally, when it was time, a train cut right through the night and stopped right where we were. I stepped onto the train thinking this was a dream. The train sped up and went all around the town. I could see my house, my friend's house, and the mine shafts. When the train halted and I stepped out, I could see that this did not seem right. All the houses were abandoned, and the only people who were there were William and I. As the train started to move, I hung on to it and screamed to go home. The train seemed to move like lightning, and before I knew it, I was back. It was now around 8 in the morning, and I could see my friends going to school. As I caught up with them, they asked me what I had seen. I began to share my experiences, but once I got to the part about William, they all looked confused. What are you talking about? There's nobody named William in this town. I tried to tell them, but it didn't work. Then I remembered. When I had clung to the train, William stayed there. It seemed like he had just vanished, and I was the only one who remembered. With such a creepy experience, you'd think I'd never go back, and you'd be right. After that, I stayed away from urban legends in fear that they were real. But as the years passed and my grip on my memory began to fade, I decided to go back. It's been 50 years since this event, and I knew that my hometown would much closely resemble the town I saw after I took the train. I drove for about 5 hours, not knowing where I was going, just that I was going in the right direction. When I stopped, I found it. It was exactly like the town in my vision, except this time, I knew it was real. I looked around and stopped to take a few pictures, but as I was taking it, I was scared out of my mind by someone tapping my shoulder. I turned around, half expecting there to be a ghost, but it was just a little boy. "I'm sorry for scaring you, but do you have any food with you?" he asked. "I have a granola bar with me, but where are your parents?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. He took the bar and ate it hungrily. For a second, his face became disfigured, and almost corpse-like. I rubbed my eyes, and whatever I saw had disappeared. "Let me show you the others," he said. The boy led me to a house where there were 10 children, all wearing outdated clothing which was torn and dirty. "How long have you been living here?" I asked. "Just a few weeks," said the boy. What he said felt a bit off, like it wasn't true. But it had to be true, otherwise he would have been much, much more hungry. These children didn't look starving at all. "How'd you get here?" I asked. "We got here on a train," said a little girl. Now I knew something wasn't right. No trains had run through this town for about 200 years now. Unless... Again, the faces of the children changed, looking lifeless. But as quick as the change came, it vanished. But then, I remembered. The boy that I spoke to first, he was William, who everyone had forgotten. The girl's name was Abigail, and she vanished one day, never to be seen again. Why had nobody remembered them, and why were they alive? The last time someone saw them was 50 years ago. It became clear to me at once I wasn't talking to live children. I was talking to their corpses. I ran out of the house into my car and drove away. I never looked back. My daughter's house was around a few hundred miles from here, and it would take me around 6 to 8 hours to get there. I drove across the barren roads, and in a few hours, I began to see civilization again. After I found her house, I knocked on the door. She opened her door and looked surprised to see me. "Mother, where have you been?" she asked. "I thought I told you where I was going. I was visiting my hometown," I said. I'd only been gone for a few days at most, so why was she so surprised? "Yes, but you've been gone for so long. I sent a search party out for you. I began to lose hope after the first few months," she said.